Some UFC rivalries are built on respect, others on business. But the story of Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier is different. It's pure hate. It's personal. Two champions, two elite fighters, and one rivalry that turned into a war, inside and outside the octagon. This wasn't just a clash of styles. It was a clash of egos, of values, of two men who didn't just want to win, they wanted to destroy each other. What started as a battle between a reigning king and a fierce challenger turned into live insults, press conference brawls, and a saga that would change both of their careers forever. But how did it all begin? When did the hate start? And who was the real winner in the end? Because inside the octagon, one of them came out on top. But outside, the story takes a very different turn. Today, we dive into the most intense rivalry in MMA history, Jon Jones versus Daniel Cormier. From the first insults to the scandal that changed everything, this is the story of two warriors who refused to accept defeat. Before we step into the chaos, let's meet the fighters. To understand this rivalry, we first need to know its protagonists. Jon Jones, the prodigy of MMA. At just 23, he became the youngest champion in UFC history. His style was unique: height, reach, creativity, and a killer mindset inside the cage. He dominated the light heavyweight division like no one before. And then there's Daniel Cormier, an Olympic wrestler, undefeated in his career, with unbreakable determination. Cormier wasn't just strong, he was a warrior. But there was a problem. Jones was the king of the category he wanted to reign over. It all began in 2014. Cormier, undefeated, moved down to light heavyweight with a mission: dethrone Jon Jones. And from the first moment, the tension between them was evident. The first face-off between Jones and Cormier became personal in seconds. In an interview, Jon told Cormier, "I can take you down whenever I want." Cormier, an Olympic wrestler, didn't take it well. And from there, the fire started. But everything exploded at the famous UFC 178 press conference. It was supposed to be a simple stare-down, but it ended up being a real fight. They pushed each other. Cormier threw a punch, Jones responded with a burst of violence. Total chaos. That moment changed the history of this rivalry. It was no longer just a fight for the title. It was a war of pride. A battle of hatred. With the UFC world ablaze, the fight was set. The octagon was ready. And the fate of these two men was about to change forever. On January 3, 2015, the UFC world stopped. Jon Jones versus Daniel Cormier. UFC 182. After months of insults, fights outside the octagon, and a hatred that seemed unreal, they would finally face each other in the cage. The fight began, and from the first round, it was clear Cormier wasn't going to back down. He came in aggressively, pressuring Jones with his boxing and looking to close the distance. He knew if he let Jones fight at distance, he'd be in trouble. In the third round, Cormier was at his best. He landed hard punches, took the fight to the clinch, and started landing uppercuts. But Jones held his own. His resilience, his composure under pressure, were inhuman. The fight went into the fifth round. Cormier wasn't giving up, but the fight was already over. Jon Jones had proven he was the best. When the final bell rang, everyone knew who had won. Jon Jones had defeated Daniel Cormier by unanimous decision. And to make it even more humiliating, in the post-fight interview, Jones taunted Cormier with a simple message: "Go to sleep, baby." But this story didn't end there, because what happened next changed everything. Jon Jones had defeated Daniel Cormier. He remained the undisputed light heavyweight champion. He seemed invincible. But outside the octagon, his life was about to collapse. Just a few months after his victory, Jones was at the center of one of the most serious scandals in UFC history. In April 2015, he was accused of leaving the scene of a car accident, but not just any accident. Jones crashed into a pregnant woman's vehicle and immediately fled, leaving his car and belongings behind. When police arrived at the scene, they found traces of marijuana, a tube of cash, and documents directly linking the car to Jones. It was a massive scandal. The media pressure was uncontrollable, and the UFC had no choice but to take action. Jon Jones was suspended indefinitely and stripped of his title. For the first time in his career, the man who felt invincible was out of the game. His image was shattered. The question was no longer whether anyone could beat Jon Jones, but whether he would ever fight again. With Jones out of the way, the UFC had a decision to make. They needed a new champion. Someone who represented discipline, consistency, and honor inside the octagon. And there was only one name on the list: Daniel Cormier. Cormier received the opportunity to fight for the vacant title against Anthony Johnson at UFC 187. This was his second chance to become champion. And this time, he didn't waste it. The fight wasn't easy. Johnson knocked him down with a brutal punch in the first round, but Cormier held his own. Little by little, he brought the fight to his rhythm, and in the third round, he submitted Johnson with a rear-naked choke. At that moment, the championship belt was around his waist. Finally, Daniel Cormier was the light heavyweight champion. His dream had come true, but there was a problem. Even though he held the belt, Cormier knew he could never consider himself the best, until he beat Jon Jones inside the octagon. In every interview, at every press conference, Jones's shadow was still there. And fate had plans for that to happen, because Jon Jones would return. And he would return with a vengeance. On July 29, 2017, the MMA world came to a standstill. UFC 214, the rematch, Cormier vs. Jones, Part 2. This time, the champion was Cormier, but the betting experts said Jones was still the favorite. The tension in the air was unbearable. From the first round, the fight was a war. Cormier came in more aggressively than ever. He stood up to Jones and forced him to exchange punches. This time, there was no hesitation. This time, he went all out. But Jones was patient. He withstood the pressure and began wearing Cormier down with kicks to the legs, the body, and the arm. He did it with surgical precision, waiting for the exact moment to strike. And then, in the third round, came the blow that changed everything. Jones threw a brutal kick to Cormier's head. The impact was sharp, brutal. Cormier staggered, and in a matter of seconds, he was on the ground. Jones attacked him with a flurry of punches until the referee stopped the fight. It was official. Jon Jones was back, and he had destroyed his greatest enemy. Jon Jones was once again the light heavyweight champion. In the post-fight interview, he broke his arrogant persona and had a few words for Cormier. If you think Daniel Cormier is a loser, you're wrong. He's a true champion in life. For the first time in years, it seemed like Jones had matured, that he had finally put his troubled side behind him. But just when everyone thought Jones had gotten it right this time, things took an unexpected turn. Weeks later, USADA announced that Jones had tested positive for steroids. His victory was annulled, his title revoked, and once again, Daniel Cormier was the champion. But for Cormier, victory didn't taste like glory. He knew he'd lost inside the octagon. He knew the only way to close this story was a third fight. But that never happened. Jon Jones vs. Daniel Cormier, one of the most intense rivalries in MMA history. Two champions, two styles, two completely opposite personalities. But in the end, only one question remained. Who was the real winner? If we look at the numbers, Jon Jones took the victory in both fights. He was superior in the octagon. When they fought, he showed he had the talent, technique, and intelligence to beat Cormier. But legacy isn't just about statistics. Outside the octagon, Jones was his own worst enemy. Scandals, doping, legal issues, his history was filled with wasted talent. Despite being considered by many to be the greatest fighter of all time, there was always a shadow of doubt about his greatness. Cormier, on the other hand, was the example of discipline and perseverance. He never had Jones's problems. He was always a model athlete, a champion inside and outside the cage. He became a commentator, an analyst, a mentor to new fighters. His legacy was built on respect. In subsequent interviews, Cormier has spoken about how difficult it was to face Jones. Not only because of Jon's talent, but because of what he represented. For him, Jones symbolized what he hated most in a fighter: uncontrolled talent, without values, without ethics. But he has also recognized something important. "He made me better," he once said. "Without him, I might never have reached my peak." As the years went by, things changed. Daniel Cormier retired in 2020, leaving behind a legacy as a double UFC champion at light heavyweight and heavyweight. Jon Jones, after more suspensions and troubles outside the sport, finally returned in 2023 and became heavyweight champion, further cementing his status as one of the greatest of all time. But despite everything, the third fight between them never happened. And probably never will. The rivalry between Jones and Cormier left us with epic fights, unforgettable moments, and drama that few can match in UFC history. But in the end, who really won? Some say Jon Jones because he beat him in the Octagon. Others say Cormier because his legacy was cleared. But the truth is, thanks to this rivalry, they both won, because together, they created one of the most legendary stories in MMA history. And you? Who do you consider the true winner? Leave it in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more MMA content. See you at the next fight.